Okay, in chapter 9-1, we talked about Washington taking office, as well as some of the economic problems that were facing the country, and it ended up with the Whiskey Rebellion. Now, Washington had to put it down. In 9-2, we're talking about our foreign policy, our relations with other countries. Okay, so if you remember, the Secretary of the State under Washington is Thomas Jefferson. You really can't talk about America's foreign policy without discussing the French Revolution. As many of you guys remember, I did quite a big lesson on the French Revolution just a couple of weeks ago. And, you know, at first, most Americans support the French Revolution. After all, the French had supported America during our revolution. And without France's aid, I doubt would have been able to have been as successful and maybe not even been able to win the war against the British. So at first, Americans are supporting it. After all, we know what it's like to fight for our liberty, fight for freedom, to get rid of an unjust monarchy. But then, as you know, it turns violent. I mean, bloodshed. They end up executing King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette. Robespierre comes into power, and he just goes crazy, basically, executing people that he feels are a threat to the revolution, even people who aren't supporting the revolution enthusiastically enough end up at the guillotine. So, you know, at American beginning to like, oh my gosh, this is, I don't think we can support this. But Jefferson, the Secretary of State, and remember, he had been our ambassador to France, still sides with France. Now, he's not in favor of executing the king and queen, but he is in favor of violence for democracy, for liberty. Well, Hamilton and John Adams said, no way, man. You can't have a true democracy with this kind of violence. So Hamilton and Adams do not. So you start to see a split in the cabinet between Jefferson and Hamilton and Adams. All right? And, you know, honestly, it's a tough call. I mean, France did support us, but my gosh, the violence and the gore and the cruelty, and I'm telling you, Robespierre is gone insane. So this is a tough call. Should America support France? Now, the French Revolution, it spreads terror throughout Europe. The kings and the monarchs of Europe are terrified that these revolutionary ideas in France are going to spill over into their borders, and they do not want that. They want to remain in power. So Austria, Prussia, England, you know, Europe is plunging into war, and it lasts for about 20 years. Now, here's what you need to know. America has signed a treaty with France as allies. Now, France comes to the United States and says, hey, listen, we want you to honor your treaty with us. We want to use your ports, you know, your ships, as we fight the British. They also want to use our ports to attack British shipping. And now Washington wants to remain neutral. He doesn't want anything to do with these European wars. Okay? How could he let France use our ports to attack the British and still remain neutral? Now, Hamilton argues this. He goes, hey, George, here's the deal. You don't have to honor this treaty because you made it, or our country made it, with King Louis XVI, and he is dead. So you don't have to honor this treaty. Now, Jefferson says, oh, no way, man. We made this treaty with France, with the people of France. We have to honor this treaty. So now what is Washington going to do? So after listening to both sides, Washington listens to Jefferson, he listens to Hamilton, and he decides on the treaty, or a policy of neutrality. And he issues the Neutrality Proclamation in April of 1793. Okay? He says, we are not going to get involved. We are not going to honor our treaty with France. We're staying out of it. Jefferson is incensed. This is a defeat for Jefferson. And he ends up leaving the cabinet. Okay? So this has put a big strain on his cabinet, and Jefferson leaves. So the Neutrality Proclamation is, again, signed in April of 1793. said the U.S. would not support either side. He doesn't want to disrupt U.S. relations with either country. He wants to be friends with England. He wants to be friends with France. Can't we all just get along? Or at least, can you guys just fight and just leave us out of it? Now, Washington's in a tough bind. We owe a lot of money, $77 million. We really don't have a strong military. And now what if we do support France and England attacks us? Washington decides that he cannot get involved. But this, again, is easier said than done, because there's going to be consequences for not honoring the treaty. So what happens is, because America's staying neutral, the British and the French start seizing our ships, start seizing cargo. If we're trading with the British, the French are taking the cargo. If we're trading with the French, the British are taking the cargo. In fact, in 1793, the British captured more than 250 American ships trading with France. 250 ships, right? This is outrageous, right? Many people in the cabinet want war. They want to declare war on England, but Washington knows we are too weak. So he sends John Jay. If you remember who John Jay is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, to the British to talk, to try to come up with an agreement. So this is what happens. John Jay is able to negotiate an agreement with the British that says the British will pay for damage to American ships. Okay, they're going to pay. And believe it or not, he gets the British to get out of the forts they still hold in the West. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the British are still in America. 10 years after the Treaty of Paris, 1783, there are still some British soldiers out in some forts out west, probably thinking, America's going to fall flat on its face and they're going to come begging to us again. But now they agree that they're going to leave. But here's the one thing that this treaty, it's called Jay's Treaty, does not figure out. There is no promise the British make that they're going to quit seizing our ships. So this, the British said they're going to pay for the damage they've already done. They're going to leave our country, but they want us to pay merchants, British merchants that we have owed for, that we still owed before the Revolutionary War. So many people are upset that this treaty doesn't go far enough, but yet they agree to it. Okay, the Senate finally approved the treaty in 1795, but that issue of neutrality, are American ships going to be safe, still is unresolved. All right, that's Jay's Treaty. So Washington has had his 2 terms, and he decides, hey, 2 terms is enough. And he retires in 1796. You can actually look at his farewell address on page 588 in your textbook, by the way. And he decides he is going to, go back to Mount Vernon and relax. Unfortunately, though, he's not going to live for very, very long. Got about 3 years before he passes away. Now, Washington, in his farewell address, though, does warn Americans to stay out of European affairs. Avoid alliances with foreign countries. He feels that making these alliances with foreign countries is going to drag America into European wars. And his advice is going to guide us for quite some time. But again, unfortunately, things change and we, forget his advice. He's also going to warn us and advise us against political parties, too, by the way, just FYI. But he sets that precedent. He decides to step down after 2 terms and retires. But some things are still unresolved. What about the neutrality of the American shipping? What about the factions or the splits in his own cabinet? We'll talk about that next time.